You can go ahead and unmute yourself. And welcome to our very first edition of the Santa Rosa County Democratic Facebook Live Club. I want to introduce myself. My name is BJ Brunius, and I am a state committee man for Santa Rosa County, representing the Democratic Party. I'm also a precinct captain for Santa Rosa County, which is in the panhandle of the state of Florida. And we'll first start by introducing the channel. This is something that we're doing new here in the Panhandle. We're seeing a lot of Democratic movement shifting towards the blue ledger and what is traditionally known as a conservative area of the state. And so in order to feed and nurture the liberal movement or the liberal agenda that's happening up in the Panhandle, I decided to start this channel to help support Democratic candidates. And so we have the first candidate who basically is baptizing our channel today. So first I want to give a shout out and thank you to all the people who currently already follow our channel. We want you, those who do not follow, please like, please follow, please comment, give the channel some love. That way we can continue doing this work and spreading the agenda of the candidates that we want to see elected into office. So if you don't follow us already, please make sure that you hit the follow button, make sure that you like our page, and make sure that you go to the other Democratic counties pages as well, Escambia County, Okaloosa County, Walton County, Bay County, all those counties in the Panhandle. Make sure you go to those counties and like their pages as well and give them some love. But like I was saying, in the 2020 election, there was a blue shift. If you look at a map of the state of Florida, what you will notice is that there was a shift in the number of votes that were cast for Democratic candidates concentrated in the Panhandle. It's actually more concentrated in the Panhandle than in other parts of the state, which either trended more purple or more red, whereas the Panhandle kind of trended blue. And so we've been doing a lot of work here in the Panhandle, and part of this channel is to help, again, like I said, nurture that work. So our very first guest, we'll get right to it so that we don't keep him waiting. His name is Josh Weil. He is running for United States Senate in the great state of Florida to replace Marco Rubio, #RetireRubio. So Josh, welcome to the show.
Thank you, BJ. Glad to be here. I didn't realize this was going to be the first episode, so I'm honored.
It is the first episode, no pressure. We're not trying to, but hopefully you give our viewers something, to come back to and look forward to, and we would love to have you more than one time. You don't have to be here just one time, if that's okay with you. So the very first question. So I've had an opportunity to, obviously, in researching you, I had the opportunity to go on Google, because everything you see on Google is right? It's all facts on Google.
I mean, as a high school teacher, that's the first thing we tell students is just look it up on Google, and
right.
Yeah, that's it. It's true.
Just Google it. So I Googled you and read a little bit about your background, and so I do understand that you have been, as an adult, a lot of your adult career has been spent in educating students in both private as well as public settings. But I want to go back before you became a teacher. Tell us about Josh. Who is Josh? Who were your role models when you were growing up? Who did you want to emulate? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. I mean, so if we want to go way, way back, growing up, I would say that a lot of my, I think, positive influences. I grew up in a pretty kind of confusing, upside down household. A single mother in a string of abusive relationships, and not a lot of positive influences or reinforcement. And I found comic books at an early age. In fact, this is, we're covering up the classroom here, but in my classroom setting, we always have some comic book posters and art and things for the kids to that it's part of our setting. It's part of me, and a lot of my kind of early influence ideals of what it means to kind of do good or be better, I would say, came from there, which sets lofty goals and I think important ones. I think it's great for kids. I always try to, whether it's in my job or outside with literacy, I love the idea of comic books for kids and turning them on. We have a owner of a chain of comic stores here in Florida who has a saying, which is that 100% of kids who read comics read, and you know can't argue with that. But I think it's good when we can kind of raise the stakes of what it means to be of service or be better. And obviously it's to farcical, heroic proportions, but the idea that there shouldn't be a ceiling in terms of how high or how far you strive to help or be good. And that was something that always followed me. It followed me into my adult life. Around the age of 21, 22, I found myself in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, Found myself finding, a God of my understanding to develop a relationship with, and a life that I was taught needed to be about maximum service. And it kind of brought me back to that original idea from the comic books of what does it mean? Like, how can you know, take the ceiling off? How can you be of service? What are some of the biggest things you can do? Um, and so, if you're looking at, here I am now, and, I've jumped into a very, very large race in a very, very large state. Um, and, there's a good part of that that comes back to, from an early age, not having ceilings on that idea of how much you can help or how big the act of service can be.
So we're entering into a time in American history where people are so much more involved in politics, aware of politics, paying attention to politics. But I think on the flip side of that, people, while they're paying attention more, they're actually starting to become more frustrated with politics. I think I remember reading something that cockroaches were more popular than Congress at this point. And so as people become more aware of Congress, as people start obviously consuming political news, they are becoming more increasingly frustrated with political process. So, with that environment, why is it in this moment that you decide, where people are so frustrated with politics, why have you chosen this moment to actually jump into the political arena?
And I think you're right. I'm glad you brought that up, the frustrations, and that's nothing new. I graduated high school in 2002, and I remember around that time having to look up um, the popularity rankings, the approval ratings of president, Senate, Congress, and so forth. And I was surprised, and this was 20 years ago, I was surprised that at the time, I think Senate and Congress had an approval rating of about 18% nationwide. 18% of Americans approved of the job Congress was doing. And that number since then has never broken 30%. And yet we see such a high reelection rate. How difficult it is to unseat an incumbent in congressional and senatorial races, giving the idea that there's this incredibly low level of satisfaction nationwide, and yet no one wants to bear the responsibility for changing it, in terms of shuffling or changing their own elected officials through the primary process or the general election process in their own state. Um, for me, jumping in this, why now? I always tell people that there were two big reasons. The first is that I consider myself a progressive. And, for my life growing up here in Florida, I cannot remember ever seeing a candidate as inspiring or engaging, able to activate the community the way Andrew Gillum did in 2018. And it's a shame in a sense that no one has really picked up that progressive flag since him. We have a lot of big name Democrats in the state, but we don't have a lot of big name progressives. And no one has picked that up and really run with that after he did such an amazing job of just inspiring people and activating voters across the state. He got 4 million votes for governor in an off year. The previous record before that was 2.85 million. In the days leading up to the 2018 election, they said that if he hit 3 million, he'd win in a landslide. What he did to inspire and turn people out, I think, is the model. And unfortunately, it was not. We didn't have a statewide election in 2020, but it was not a model that has been followed or by our state Democratic Party. It's not something that has really been embraced, and we're not seeing it embraced again this year. And that goes to the second thing, which is that, I've watched our state Democratic Party, which I think I don't think it's an argument to say that they have been routinely outperformed by the Republican Party. The state Republican Party of Florida has done a far superior job of organizing, of getting voters out, and of winning elections, of getting their messaging out. And win-loss record tells it all. This is a state with more registered Democrats than Republicans, and yet routinely, year after year, for 2 decades now, we've seen almost nothing but Democrats. I'm sorry, almost nothing but Republicans winning state elections.
Right.
The Republican Party, for the most part, our only couple big wins were two big wins by Bill Nelson in years when the Republican Party chose to punt and save their resources for the next governor's race or the next Senate race. Instead. And it wasn't until Rick Scott came along and put his own money in a year that they were planning on punting, that they even got rid of Bill Nelson, and now they have all three major statewide seats in terms of governor and Senate. In a state that has more registered Democrats than Republicans, that's insane. And so to see something that was so effective and something that was able to really inspire and activate people across the state, not just in our big counties, not just in Miami and Tampa and Orlando, but everywhere, bringing people out and getting people involved, having, canvassing and door to door and just regular people. How many teachers I know after school that were going out, knocking on doors, canvassing, that felt a part of it for the Gillum race. I haven't seen anything like that in Florida in my lifetime, and I don't think that we can do that without a progressive running again. So if there wasn't going to be one, and that's what it was going to take to win, then I couldn't complain if I didn't do anything about it.
Well, I absolutely promised to the audience that I shared none of my questions with you, but you basically teed up my next question, which was that when candidates are running for office, they're told to pick a lane, whether they're going to be the moderate lane or the conservative lane or the progressive lane. And my question to you was going to be, which lane did you see yourself in? You've already outwardly declared that you're in the progressive lane, and so I want to then. So then my question would be. Since you've already, said that you're going to be driving in the progressive lane, what does that lane look like to you? What does that mean to you, and what should that mean to voters in Florida?
So for me, as a progressive, what I tell people being a progressive means to me is that I'm a human rights candidate. For me, being progressive is about ensuring human rights. I think that's the number one thing, because we have the ability to do more than any other country in the world. Any other country, like, we spent $9.8 trillion last year. That was what the United States of America federal government spent. The second highest was China, which was around 5.3, 5.4. And after that, no nation in the world spent more than $3 trillion. So we spent more than triple every nation in the world except China, and almost double China. We should not see anything. Like, if there's any good thing that we see in any country in the world, there should be nothing out there that we're like, wow, I wish I had that here in America, because there's no reason not to. Right? If like, there are no excuses. We have every resource that you need to make sure that healthcare is accessible to every American except one, which is 50 U.S. senators willing to vote yes. Like, that's the only thing we're short on, is politicians willing to actually do work and build systems that benefit the American people. And here in Florida, this is a state that has so much need. For the last 7 months, I've been driving around the state, visiting with organizers and voters and people in counties all over. I was recently up in Milton on the 4th of July, and I met with some wonderful women from the Democratic Women's Club on my way to our event that we had in Pensacola, toured through a number of counties in the Panhandle, and met with organizing groups and spoke with local residents. I've been through the Big Bend into Jefferson and Taylor County, we've done Citrus, I've been all the way down as far as Miami, we've done a whole stretch from Jacksonville and St. Augustine down Putnam County, Orange, Osceola, Polk. Like, we've been all across the state. And what I've seen is not really surprising when it's a state that hasn't had a Democratic governor since 1998. Right, a state that's had 23 years of Republican leadership, and what we see is vast neglect. And I live in Orlando, right? And I live in a really well represented, very diverse and nice part of Orlando. And that's not an accident. I have a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my wife and I chose where we wanted to raise our children. What types of schools we wanted them in, what type of neighborhoods and communities we wanted around them. And so we're in a richly diverse area. But we have a ton of counties, a vast majority of our counties in Florida that are not that diverse. And these counties tend to vote Republican, our smaller and rural counties. And what I've seen by going through there and talking to people is that they've been greatly neglected by both the Democrats and the Republicans, because for the last 20 years, the Democratic Party of Florida has chosen to abstain from supporting candidates in those counties. And oftentimes, the Republicans get elected to state house, state senate, or U.S. Congress in those areas uncontested. And for the Republican legislators, because they have no threat of being unseated, they do not return calls or answer questions or do anything outside of what is prompted for them on the national GOP policy. So, last year when we were in a pandemic, and we have over 1 million Floridians that don't have high-speed internet because Spectrum has the contract across the state to run the cables, and they say that for more than 30 of our counties, it's not profitable to run high-speed fiber optic cables out there. And so people were trying to work from home, people were trying to file their unemployment and get their benefits online through the Connect portal. People are trying to have their kids do virtual school online. And we have more than 30 counties that can't even get reliable high-speed internet because it's not profitable. And when these people called their state representatives, their state senators, their U.S. Congress people asking for help, isn't there anything you can do? They said, no, that's socialism. Or they didn't answer the phone. Or they answered and started talking to them, and then they hung up. Right? And it was the same thing when they asked for, how can we make sure we get our unemployment benefits? How can I make sure that my kids are getting their stimulus check? Things that were already passed. Stimulus money is coming. They wouldn't even help their constituents, right, access or make sure that they're getting the stimulus money for their family during a pandemic. They're so greatly neglected out there. There is so much need. And that's what progressive policies offer. Progressive policies say, what is something that every human being should have, no one should be without, right? And I'll start with the easiest one, clean water, right? Every person, human being in America should have clean water. That shouldn't be a question, it shouldn't be an argument. They don't, we know that. But if everyone should have it, then it's a human right. And if it's a human right, then it should be secured and insured by the federal government. We shouldn't have 50 different states with different levels, and some people will get better and some people will be worse and someone will be last. We shouldn't have a spectrum of acceptable, or maybe some people can be unacceptable and below that level for a number of years before it kicks over, and then we'll have an committee take over and find someone else to try for 2 years to see if it gets better. Like, so much bureaucracy in something that should be an essential basic human right in a country that has no shortage of money or resources to make it happen. We should have clean water for everyone. And from there, as you start answering questions, it goes to things like housing, to things like healthcare, internet access. In the year 2021, internet access is just as essential as having running water or electricity in your house. All right, you wouldn't let a kid, we don't send, like if DCF comes and takes a child out, they won't put them in a foster home that doesn't have electricity or running water. But internet has to be there as well, because students cannot access their education, people cannot apply for jobs, get the news. Everything comes through the internet now. Our world is dictated through the internet. It's a digital world. And that has to be an essential resource for living in America and succeeding in the year 2021. So we need to make sure that that's available in every home. These are the progressive policies. The progressive policies are about making sure that our federal government, which can ensure these things for every human being, does ensure these things for every human being. And this is why they were popular when Gillum ran, because we have a lot of counties that are widely neglected. We have a lot of places where people need these. And Republicans support progressive policies in Florida. We've seen it. We've seen it when $15 minimum wage went to the state legislature and Republican legislators unanimously rejected it. And then it went as a ballot initiative and voters got to vote, and 50% of Republican voters supported it. Same thing with legalization of marijuana. Same thing with voter reenfranchisement. Progressive policies are popular across our state, even in our rural counties, even among Republicans.
So as your strategy is to basically go to every part of the state, which I agree with you. Andrew Gillum did prioritize the Panhandle. You know, we're frequently told in Florida that the Democrats are in Miami and Orlando and Tampa. Those are where the Democratic votes are, and somewhat Tallahassee as well. But yes, those are where the concentration of Democratic voters are from a population standpoint. But if that could get us over the over the finish line, we would have done that routinely. And that's despite, as you've pointed out, the registered voter advantage that we have in the state of Florida amongst Democratic voters. So Gillum obviously did prioritize the Panhandle. Gillum lost his election by less than a percentage point. It was very, very close. And so you coming
Right
to
now, I'm looking at the voter registration numbers here. Santa Rosa County has 27,300 registered Democrats and another 35,000 registered independents or NPAs. That is more than 52,000 non-Republicans in Santa Rosa County. And I'm not saying the whole Panhandle. I'm not including Escambia and Walton and Okaloosa and Bay and everything else. Just Santa Rosa County. The number of non-Republicans there is greater than the margin of defeat for Bill Nelson or Andrew Gillum in the 2018 election.
absolutely correct.
And that's just one county.
Just one county. And so
Our
when
state
you
Democratic
came
Party focuses on 7 counties, right? We know this. They
right.
focus primarily on Dade, Broward, Orange, Hillsborough, Pinellas, Leon, and Duval. And the reason why is because if there's a greater density of Democrats there, then you raise more money for the time commitment you put into it. But money doesn't win elections. Votes do. And you don't get votes by catering to 7 out of 67 counties. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why Democrats routinely lose in our state. It's not the only reason, but it's a big one.
Right. So when you were here over the 4th of July Independence Day holiday, you were in the Panhandle. Like you said, you visited Santa Rosa County. You also visited Okaloosa County and Escambia County. Did you visit any other counties in the Panhandle while you were here?
We spent a day in Bay County as well, in Panama City, which my kids love. And that was great. And we met with organizers. We went out and we talked to some people. We didn't do an event, but then we went out to an event that the Women's Club, DWC of Bay County, was doing on the 2nd or 3rd. But those are the 4 main counties that we stopped in. And so, one of the big things, that I love, and you mentioned Gillum came out there to you, and it's not just the Panhandle, but I definitely got a lot of it in the Panhandle, is that, people get excited when a statewide candidate comes to visit because it doesn't happen as often. And they would tell me that, they remember meeting Andrew Gillum. And I get it all over the state. People will, when I mention Andrew Gillum, because I do, people will be like, oh, I love him. And they'll pull out their phone and they'll show me the selfie, like in front of his bus. Or, like I met him, I saw him when he came to our county and spoke. Like he was here twice and, I got a picture with him once. Everyone felt like they met him. The other thing I hear everywhere I go is Rubio's been our senator for 11 years and he's never been here once. He doesn't know where our county is on a map. And I mean I think that tells you something, in terms of how people feel about these candidates.
Well, I'm certainly noticing that you definitely have the passion of Andrew Gillum. I'm hearing that as you speak, and I was a big supporter of Andrew, and he came to Pensacola, and I heard him speak several times in person, and he's very, very charismatic. And I've also got selfies with him, so it's a universal experience, obviously. But you're in an election with other candidates vying to go against Rubio, right? So I don't think I'm exposing any secrets to say that you're in a primary. with some candidates who have more endorsements and have obviously more name recognition and probably a larger bank account to help them. So how do you plan to overcome what some would say are, political hurdles, particularly in this primary to go up against Rubio and the general?
Yeah, I'm never going to be the candidate that has the most money in this race, but I'm not concerned about that. And most progressives aren't. I like to use Kentucky as an example. In 2020, we saw a Kentucky primary there between Amy McGrath, who was the big moderate candidate that had the state Democratic Party's unofficial support for 2 years, against Charles Booker, who was the young progressive that was kind of running despite the fact that there was a presumed victor in that primary. Leading up to the primary, Amy McGrath had raised $71 million. Charles Booker had raised $5 million. Amy McGrath won by less than 1 percentage point in that primary. It was incredibly close. All right, and that's, and some people look at it and they say, see, progressives can't win. And what I'm telling you is that $5 million for a progressive can go almost as far as $71 million for a moderate. It's not about the money. I don't. If I'm meeting people and we're making an impact and getting votes without getting money from them, that's okay. And look, money's nice. Getting Act Blue donations is nice. Getting to put up a nice number on the FEC so that way, other organizers, want to work with us more because, they think we're legit because the only thing they base it on is money is nice. But we have a ton of people that believe in this campaign. There are an incredible amount of really, really impressive, focused, driven young progressives in this state that, when I meet our college level Dems and our young Dems, they blow me away in terms of where they're at and what they understand and have seen, compared to when I was younger, coming up 20 years ago, and it's inspiring. I've met a couple of them that if they were old enough to run for U.S. Senate, they'd be the candidate, and I'd be backing them. And so yeah, like there's a real passion for progressives that other candidates don't necessarily inspire. And maybe they do. That's not a knock. It's not to say that there's anyone else in this race that doesn't have fervent supporters as well. I think we all have, well, almost all of us. So, there's one that I'm pretty sure has no fervent supporters anymore. But everyone else pretty much has fervent support. I didn't see you like a Jenny, and then you got it. But everyone else, has their supporters. There's people who are liked. But moderates, and it's not a knock on moderates. I think that we need a wide diversity of Democrats, but moderates make it more difficult sometimes to pass. What we're seeing now, and this is one of the biggest things that I've seen changing some moderates' minds, is can we really afford to fill our party with more people that are in the cinema mansion part of the spectrum, right? What happens when we fill the center? Because the Republican Party ain't filling the center. The Republican Party has stretched the far right extreme so far, that they now call Liz Cheney, Congresswoman from Wyoming, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, they now call her a rhino, a Republican in name only. They call her a moderate and practically a liberal. 6 years ago, she represented the far right extreme of the Republican Party. They have pushed their end so far that their previous far right is now the middle. And if we continue to stack the middle with our moderate Dems, that will become the far left. Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney, who Republicans consider liberals now and like the middle of the spectrum, will be the middle of the spectrum in the nation. Like, in just a purely philosophical sense, we need to expand the far left side of our representation just to maintain balance in this country and keep the wolves at bay. And from another standpoint, we need that diversity and that stretch there because we've seen it now. During the Trump era, if they had 50 votes in the tiebreak, that was it. They rammed anything they wanted through. Didn't matter how unpopular it was. 50 and a tiebreak is done. Because when your main goal is obstruction and destruction, unanimity is very, very easy to attain. But when you're trying to build complicated, complex systems, complicated solutions to real problems in a very diverse country, there is a wide diversity of opinions, and there should be in terms of how it's done, in terms of how much we spend and how many levels and over what period of time and who's responsible for it and who monitors it and how much is distributed or funded at the federal level versus the state level versus the local level and who sets the guidelines and who's going to be involved with it and to what extent and do we try to prevent, do we spend money working to prevent people from committing fraud in it or fraudulently access? Like, there's so many considerations to be made that have a wide diversity of opinions that unanimity is nearly impossible. And expecting 50 Democrats across that spectrum to agree on building systems that we need for revitalizing federal infrastructure that's been broadly neglected for, let's see, it's been 41 years since Ronald Reagan took office. So 41 years. To, to expect them to make major changes to corporate tax rate and wealth taxes that historically, again, until these exact same 41 years ago, had been around 75% and then have now floated in the 25 to 30 range since then, right? In order to fund programs and provide for our country, in order to, make real adjustments to the minimum wage, in order to, create solutions that impact people. We talk about the Green New Deal and climate change. And the Green New Deal, by the way, it's a really good environmental plan. It's the best job plan that's been on the Congress floor since FDR. The Green New Deal, just for the record, and for anyone who doesn't know, is going to eliminate 32,000 jobs in the coal industry and replace them with up to 50 million jobs in renewable energy sectors. It is an amazing jobs plan, and for that alone, we should have the entire Senate behind it. If actually not destroying our planet wasn't a partisan political issue today, but how you implement and to what extent you do these things requires nuance. It requires debate, and it's not going to get unanimity. And so we need more than 50. We have to expand our representation in the Senate and the House. We have to get up to at least 54, 56 senators in there. And we need more of them to be progressive. Because if we add 6 more Joe Manchins, we don't get anywhere. We gain nothing.
So let's be real, Josh, in the general election, you're going to be facing a pretty powerful incumbent, a well-known incumbent. This is a candidate who was selected by the Republican Party leadership to give the rebuttal to a State of the Union address. This is a candidate who has run for president before, and all the name recognition and money donations that come with that. So how do you plan to defeat someone that powerful, who really knows the political scene very well in order to win elections? How do you plan to defeat who Trump calls Little Marco?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, the thing that we're pointing out is that Marco Rubio has money. The thing that, we're criticizing Democrats earlier for valuing over votes. What we don't know is how much of that is going to transfer over. I'm fascinated. We have there's going to be a new data tracking system that incorporates Republican and Democratic voters and donors, coming available for Democratic candidates, expected to be released in November of this year. And I am hugely excited to start canvassing to registered Republicans and people who donated to things like the Lincoln Project, to Biden's campaign, to Democrats or even non-Trumpist Republican candidates that primaried a Trumpist Republican this year and last year, because there's a lot of Republicans in this state. Not as many Democrats, but a lot of Republicans, and a solid number in a state that, when we run contested elections, are tightly contested. A solid number that are disgusted by what they've seen out of their party and what they've seen people do. The fact that their party was blatantly responsible for a terrorist attack on our nation's capital and the attempted assassination of the vice president, the Speaker of the House, and numerous members of Congress, right, is more than they can bear. And for many of them, they're not going to unregister. They're not going to change their registration because they don't want to give up. To them, being a Republican means something else, and they're not going to concede that and give it up to the Trumpists. And the fact that Rubio has basically begged and groveled to maintain his Trump support and have that endorsement from Trump is going to put him in hot waters with some of them. And Rubio's not unbeatable. Nobody's unbeatable. And the really interesting thing about Rubio is that he's never really been contested. We've seen him in a contested race once, and he didn't win it. And not only did he not win it, but he got off of his game and he got dragged down to the level where he was literally, this is not a euphemism, he was literally comparing penis sizes on national television in a debate for president of the United States. He got dragged down to the lowest level and completely thrown off of his game when he was contested. Because in 2010, when he ran for Senate, he was not contested. The Democratic candidate, Kendrick Meek, who's a great guy, came in third. And it is on record at this point that Bill Clinton and numerous other influential Democrats at the state and national level tried talking him out and convincing him to drop out of that race. He did not only did he not get support from the Democratic Party, they tried convincing him to drop out of the race. And in 2016, Patrick Murphy ran, and as soon as Rubio jumped back in it, all of his support left. There was no campaign. Patrick Murphy had all of his financial support leave him. Rubio never spent another dollar. He coasted off of his presidential campaign. He didn't actually campaign. He ran for president. He switched over in April to Senate, and he coasted to a 7-point victory without having to actually run. Rubio has not been contested in this state, and somehow we built this mythical aura around him that he's unbeatable. But he's undefeated in the same way I'm undefeated. Because no one's... he's never been in a contest, really. Mm-hmm. Like, he's won, yes, but not against competition. And so, if we put together a real race with a candidate who is actually going around the state, who is meeting with people, who is building a platform based on the needs of people. This is not a platform of sound bites. I'm not going to be doing the thing Marco Rubio did during numerous presidential debates in 2016, where someone asked me a question about healthcare, and I respond with something about Islamic rhetoric about 9/11 to fire up the crowd and get a 15-second YouTube clip. Right? We're going around, we're talking to people about the issues in their county. We're learning about the problems people have where they live and what's going on. And when we come back, it changes our platform. We update our platform to include things that are needed in this state. And you can't do that running a campaign from Twitter in Sebring, Florida, or bunkering down here in Orlando, where all you do is make phone calls around the clock to big dollar donors. You have to go out and meet the people. You have to talk to the people and listen and learn and be their representative. Yes, it's a popularity contest, but it's a popularity contest where the winner is going to have a massively influential stake in the lives of the 20 plus million people who live in this state. And that means something to the voters.
So for the last 15 minutes of this interview, we're going to get into some of the viewers' questions. We have some viewers' questions coming through, plus some people had submitted some questions beforehand in anticipation for this interview. So I got the first question here. Okay, are you ready?
Nice printed cards too, very nice.
We prepare in the panhandle. So are you ready?
Yes, sir.
So this question says, you've publicly come out in support of Medicare for All. Can you give our viewers an understanding of what Medicare for All looks like to you?
Absolutely. And I think it's a great question because there's a lot of confusion over that. A lot of people think, and some of it is because of the Republican rhetoric and the Republican attacks on it, calling it socialized medicine. And so, they compare it to a system in other countries where the healthcare system is state-run and operated. Essentially a true socialist system of medicine would involve seizure by the government of the means of production. And so all hospitals and doctors' offices and healthcare procedures would be under the auspices of the federal government. And that's not what Medicare for All is. Medicare for All does not have the government taking over the healthcare industry. Medicare for All has the government taking over the insurance industry. And that's the one that is broken as all heck. The insurance industry is the problem. And it's why, for me, personally, I was not a big fan of the Affordable Care Act. Yes, the Affordable Care Act did more good. It put us in a better place than we were before the Affordable Care Act. But the Affordable Care Act, all it did was require everyone to buy insurance, which is the big problem in terms of like most people's medical debt is a result of insurance. Like I have really good health insurance. And when I go to doctors or I have to get tests run, I get a letter in the mail afterwards saying, your test costs $575. And we, as the insurance company, negotiated them down to $172. We paid $0, and now you owe 172 minus your copay. You owe $142. And some people are like, wow, okay, so I only had to pay 142. That's not bad. The insurance company is taking our money every month, and notice, look very hard at the we paid $0 part of it. Basically, they told the doctor, screw you, here's what we'll give you, and then tell me I have to be the one to give it. Insurance companies make billions of dollars a year, and none of it actually goes to your healthcare. None of it. Because any profit that the insurance industry makes is literally the money coming out of what is being spent on healthcare that doesn't go to healthcare. Medicare for All solves that. Medicare for All is a single payer insurance system where the federal government is the only insurer in the country. And so you don't have to worry about getting those letters saying, we paid your doctor $0 and you're responsible for the rest. Instead, all healthcare is paid for at the federal level. They are the one and only insurance company. All billing is done to them. All payment is done from them. You have your choice of private doctors. You still go to the hospital, the emergency room as it is, but we don't have ridiculous things where people have to now spend $300 on an emergency room visit or $5,000 for an ambulance or whatever else costs are because insurance companies have, the result of insurance companies refusing to pay for things or negotiating ridiculous prices has created a wild system where our costs of healthcare look like nowhere else in the world. Right? We can actually have a healthcare system where procedures cost what they cost, where it's not about turning a profit. And really important for here in Florida, where you can have an emergency room or a hospital nearby, even if it isn't profitable. And I mentioned that because when I was in Taylor County, I learned that Taylor has a huge problem, which is that they have one hospital with an emergency room. And in a county of 15,000 people, they don't have enough emergencies to keep it funded. And that hospital has not been making enough money. They've been going to the Board of County Commissioners month after month asking for money, but it's the Taylor County Board of County Commissioners, so they don't got a lot of money to give them either. And everyone in Taylor County, Republican and Democrat, both know it's only a matter of time before that hospital leaves because it isn't profitable. And when it does, their nearest emergency room will be an hour and 25 minutes away. That's a problem because when your nearest emergency room is an hour and 25 minutes away, when you have an emergency, they're not going to drive you to that nearest emergency room. They're going to drive you to the morgue because you're not going to make it.
So one of
When
the
Republican legislators or people are asked about this, they refuse to help because they don't believe in subsidizing healthcare. They think that's socialism. But Republicans in Taylor County don't care what you call it. They just want to make sure that there's an emergency room in their town, whether it's profitable or not.
one of the critiques that I'm hearing from healthcare providers is that a single payer system will result in decreased reimbursement rates, and how can providers make ends meet, support their staff, and also make a decent living, and willing to make the sacrifice to go through all the educational years that are required to become a physician, as well as the educational debt that they take on to become a physician, if a single payer system may result in the reimbursements for their services going down. What do you say to that critique?
I think that's really funny and illogical because you're comparing our current system, which we have hard evidence of and know how it impacts, right, what physicians receive. And then we have a theoretical system that doesn't exist yet. And what you're worried about occurring in the theoretical system is literally the thing that's already happening in the current system. That's the thing that's here. So if we have two systems, one where insurance companies routinely fail to pay, there's a reason why there is an entire job field called medical billing, why every doctor's office needs to pay additional staff members just to all day, every day, call up and fight with insurance companies about trying to get their money. Because insurance companies routinely refuse to pay, never pay the whole amount, and doctors are lucky to get what they get from insurance companies. So we have a system where that already takes place. And you're telling me that the solution to that system might do the thing that already has, or when everyone else who looks at it says it won't, yeah, I'm going to go with that alternative. It's kind of like the Trump ads. If you remember the Trump ads last year in the months leading up to the election, where they showed pictures of cities on fire all across the country while there were massive riots during the Black Lives Matter protests. In Oregon and in Missouri and Michigan, just towns on fire with people rioting and in so much pain. And the ad said that, like, this is what the country will look like under Joe Biden. It's like, no, literally, that's what the country looks like under Donald Trump. Like, those aren't special effects. That's actual footage of the United States of America during the Trump presidency. That is what is happening now. And that's the same thing with, your question about healthcare. Like, that's what's happening to physicians now.
And do you have a plan on how to convince people who may not necessarily be in favor of a Medicare for all system? What is your plan in order to convince them to do something that they're not used to doing, or to go along with a system that maybe they're not accustomed to, that they've heard really bad things about, whether those things are true or not? How do you plan to move the public in that direction?
So, in terms of the conversations I've had, and this is with Republicans as well as Democrats, I found that it's, the skills that I've developed over 10 years being a public school teacher are the ones that are most important. Because just like when you're trying to delve deep and probe and help students get to that conclusion on their own when you're in a classroom, it's the same thing when you're leading a person along who doesn't understand something, and you can't just tell it to them. They have to make the connection themselves. That's the only way that it actually is real and sticks. Is if they can come to the conclusion and make that, they need to have that learning moment and make the connection themselves. And so it requires asking a lot of questions. And there are different ways to do it. I've had ones where we've talked with Republicans, and I'll ask them, and sometimes I have to ask repeatedly because I get answers that don't have anything to do with the question that I asked. So you just say, okay, yeah, that's great, great. But now about this, right? And you just go back and you ask the question again, like, what is it that you're worried about? What part of Medicare for all do you disagree with? Like, what is it about it that you think is wrong for America? And the answers that I hear are oftentimes people are worried their taxes are going to go up, or they're worried that it's all about giving it away to other people, that they won't benefit. It'll only go to other people. And those are the two biggest things Republicans hear, because the misinformation that they're routinely given is all fear driven. It's all about things being taken from you and given to others. Um, so I've had numerous times where we've had that conversation, and I can always go in, and there are three ways of funding Medicare for all that doesn't affect the working class in any way, shape, or form. The first one is funding it off of a wealth tax. That's easy peasy. The second one is funding it off of the employer contributions. Basically, developing a tax or a system where we're taking what employer contributions are, because the price tag on the federal Medicare for all system can actually be covered based on just the employer contributions alone of what businesses and employers are paying for their employees to have insurance across the country totaled up. So if you took just that employer contribution, not the employee contributions part, not private, not what other people are paying, you can insure the entire country when you take the insurance company's profit out. So we have a wealth tax, we have the employer contribution, and there's a third one that's evading me at the moment. But there are three ways that we can fund it without having to actually. Yeah. Well, we have three ways of funding it. They don't actually have to ever come out of your pocket. They don't have to affect you where you pay more to receive this to begin with. And oftentimes I'll ask them, like, you can't argue with people. You can't tell them no. This is just like being a teacher in a classroom. When a student has a wrong idea about something, you can't say, no, you're wrong, because then you've started a fight. There's not going to be any learning that occurs after that. Right? So if I have a student that's, completely convinced that it's wrong, usually I'll ask them, okay, well, what do you think would be better, or how could we improve it? Can you tell me how we can improve this bill? Or what would be a version of this bill that you would support? And multiple times in a number of different counties, I've had the same response from Republicans. And they say, if you can have a healthcare system where I get healthcare and it actually comes and helps Americans like me, and I don't have to pay for it, hell yeah, I want that. Because I can't afford my medical bills. I can't afford my prescriptions. I can't afford to go to the emergency room. Like, they'll tell you, like, they have back debt from a hospital visit, or they can't afford their insulin, or they can't, like, they have problems. They know the healthcare system's broken. Nobody's arguing that. Like, working class Republicans aren't saying, like, this system's perfect. The idea that the Obama rhetoric of, if you love your insurance company, you can keep it. Nobody loves their insurance company. There's nobody out there that's like, my Cigna agent is so close to my heart. I couldn't imagine having to stop paying them premiums every month. Nobody likes their insurance coverage. Everyone wants a better system. What should that system look like? And oftentimes, even Republicans, when you let them take ownership of it, will describe a system that is exactly like Medicare for all. They've just received misinformation of what Medicare for all actually is.
So let's do a little rapid fire in the last 5 minutes. um, where do you stand on the filibuster? Get rid of it or keep it?
Get rid of it.
Get rid of it. Good. So what is your position?
But I will say real quick, if
Uh-huh.
we get rid of it and we do not pass massive, massive systems, if we do not provide real change that impacts the lives of the American people within 2 years of passing that filibuster bill, we are doomed. Okay? Because the only way that we can be successful after passing the filibuster is to profoundly impact and improve the lives of the American people. And if we don't do that, then they're going to kick the Democrats out, and there's going to be Republicans without a filibuster to stop them. So, yes, we have to get rid of the filibuster, but that is not a solve all. We must follow it with action.
Where do you stand on the For the People Act?
Absolutely. I got a
So,
John Lewis sign around here somewhere.
and in terms of the reparations, I was doing a little bit of research on your website. Where do you stand on reparations? Are you for reparations, against reparations, or do you just think it
I
needs to be
am
studied?
for reparations. So I came into this as, I would say, your typical white person who, when they hear reparations, says, I don't even know what that would look like. And then at some point during the campaign, I met with members of the NAACP in Jacksonville, and they educated me because I told them, I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. And they broke out research and documents and studies and plans, and it is all there. It has all been done. Like, we don't need to commission studies. I know that there's a formality of like, well, a study hasn't actually been commissioned yet by the Senate, and that's a typical step before doing. The work has been done. It is there, and there are real, tangible solutions that can be done for less than the cost of our current infrastructure plan. You can actually create micro economies for ADOS, American descendants of slavery, where you create communities of ownership similar to what the Native Americans received in terms of land ownership, where that land is owned by ADOS and all businesses and services within are provided by ADOS, where they're responsible for police departments, for banks, for schools, for everything, without threat of outside, without where they can reap the profit without having other predatory financial institutions or zoning or things trying to restrict them or cut them off, without a fear of gentrification coming in, because the inevitable threat to every successful black community is gentrification that comes in, and large cash buyers are coming in and they take over and they take it away. And by having deed protected land that can only be owned by ADOS citizens, there's no threat of gentrification and they can actually flourish. And I know the question that you're probably thinking, because it's the next one I had, which is, well, where is this land? Like, how do you just decide where to give them? And because that's what I asked. And it's so simple and beautiful, because what they told me was that the federal government has already actually drawn boundaries around this land years ago, and they continue to keep all of this land segregated. It's called redlining. And the number of communities that have been explicitly redlined would be the ones that would be transferred over in ADOS reparations. They've already been marked off. They're complete, well-defined zip codes. And what was the last thing on that? Hold on. They've already been marked off. They're completely well-defined zip codes. Ah, um, and yeah, they're already set up. It's there, right? The government has basically told us where we can do this, where we can make this transfer, that it would be the most successful. So those red line districts would be the ones. In terms of the number of them, I'll tell you that if you invested $100 million into each red line zip code, right, you could fund 18,000 zip codes for the $1.8 trillion of this current infrastructure plan. Now, 18,000 zip codes, remember, there's only 10,000 zip codes. It goes from 00000 to 99999. So that would be 18% of all zip codes. And I promise you that the number of red line districts is less than 18% of all zip codes, which means at a capital infusion of $100 million per red line zip code, the actual ADOS reparations plan is fundable for less than the current infrastructure plan sitting on the Senate floor.
And where do you stand on expanding the Supreme Court, for or against?
Um, Four.
And where are you on drilling in the Gulf? Continue drilling or stop drilling?
Um, President Biden is instituting a plan that will be presented with Special Climate Envoy Kerry in Glasgow at the international conference in November of this year. That is going to set a goal for the United States to be zero carbon by 2050. That was a goal that should have been zero carbon by 2040 if we hadn't been driving full speed in the opposite direction for the last 4 years and really dragging our feet on progress for the 16 years before that. Um, what he's doing is a big deal. If we had been doing this right since the year 2000, we could be zero carbon by 2030. If we really were driven for this and going all out, we could still be zero carbon by 2040 now. But 2050 is a responsible and achievable measure. And if we're saying that we're going to convert this entire country to be zero carbon by 2050, we damn well better not be continuing to destroy our natural environments and risk the health of public health of American citizens drilling for oil on anywhere anymore. Though that's done. That's the past.
Well, that concludes this interview. I appreciate you coming to the show. We have several more questions. I'm sorry to the people who sent questions that I wasn't able to get to, but we said we would keep it to about an hour, and we're right at 7:01. But if you want to come back and answer some more of those questions, you can certainly do that. Please let all the viewers know how they can support your candidate.
So please go to joshwheel.org. That is www.joshwheel.org. That is our website. You can learn more about me. You can learn more about our platform and our policies, and where you can register and sign up to be a volunteer, to join. We have a fantastic, we just hired on our first full-time salaried employee who is going to be our field director and is reaching out and setting up volunteer teams across the state as we speak. He's got a big job on him because it's a big state. But if you are excited or you want to be involved in this campaign, please at joshwheel.org. You can sign up to volunteer or be a part of the campaign, or you can donate money, because while I'm okay with not being the candidate with the most money, we do need some money, like these pretty cards that we give out to people that help people remember to vote for me on August 23rd, 2022. They cost money, and that salary costs money, and all of the great things that we want to do to get the message out to people across the state, some of them cost money. So every dollar helps, and I am incredibly grateful for all the support we've received from people in Florida and around the country.
And just let the viewers know what your social media handles are so they can follow you.
Here on the screen on Twitter and Facebook, it is at Wheel for U.S. Senate, WEIL, the number 4 U.S. Senate. And on Instagram and TikTok, because we got a TikTok now. I've done 3 TikTok videos. They're really good. You should check them out. It is Josh Wheel for Senate, JOSHWEILFOR Senate.
Perfect. Well, again, thanks for joining us. If there's, please leave your comments on how you thought the interview went. If you want to have Josh answer more questions, we'd certainly help get those answers for you, or we can invite him back onto the show for our next episode. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, take care. Thanks, Josh, for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, BJ.
All right.